few cards in the tarot are as misunderstood as the Hanged Man. At first glance, it appears unsettling. A man hangs upside down from a tree, suspended between heaven and earth. He is not struggling to escape. He is not pleading for help. Instead, he appears remarkably peaceful. Around his head shines a halo, suggesting that what looks like defeat from the outside may actually be a moment of profound awakening. This paradox is the key to understanding the Hanged Man. From a Jungian perspective, this card is not about punishment, failure, or helplessness. It represents one of the most important moments in the individuation journey, the voluntary surrender of the ego's need for control. It is the archetype of transformation through a change in consciousness. Carl Jung believed that the greatest obstacles to psychological growth often come from the ego itself. The ego wants certainty. It wants control. It wants quick answers and predictable outcomes. It builds an identity around what feels safe and familiar. Yet the unconscious has a very different agenda. It does not seek comfort. It seeks wholeness. Again and again, life presents us with experiences that challenge our assumptions, disrupt our plans, and force us to question who we think we are. The Hanged Man symbolizes this moment of suspension. It is the point where our usual strategies stop working, not because we have failed, but because they are no longer capable of carrying us into the next stage of development. In modern life, we are taught that progress comes through constant action. We are encouraged to move faster, work harder, solve problems immediately, and never stop moving. The Hanged Man offers the opposite wisdom. Sometimes the deepest transformation occurs not through action, but through stillness. There are moments when the psyche requires us to stop forcing solutions and instead allow something new to emerge. This kind of waiting is not passive, it is deeply active on the inside. Beneath the surface, unconscious processes begin reorganizing the personality in ways that conscious effort never could. Jung often described individuation as a dialogue between the conscious and unconscious mind. But genuine dialogue requires listening. The Hanged Man is the archetype that teaches us how to listen. When our familiar ways of interpreting reality collapse, we become receptive to symbols, dreams, intuitions, and synchronicities. The unconscious begins speaking more clearly, precisely because the ego has stopped drowning it out with constant activity. This is why the Hanged Man appears calm. He has stopped resisting the process. His surrender is not weakness, it is openness. One of the most striking symbols of the Hanged Man is his upside-down position. Symbolically, the world has been turned on its head. What once seemed obvious no longer makes sense. Long-held beliefs begin to crumble. Old identities feel empty. We may question our career, our relationships, our values, or even our understanding of ourselves. Jung believed that psychological transformation often begins with this experience of disorientation. Before consciousness can expand, it must first recognize the limitations of its previous worldview. The Hanged Man does not simply see the world differently. He becomes a different observer. Many people encounter this archetype during periods of transition. A relationship ends. A career no longer feels meaningful. A spiritual path that once offered certainty begins to feel hollow. We often experience these moments as crises, yet psychologically, they may represent invitations. The old identity is dissolving so that a deeper one can emerge. The difficulty is that we cannot immediately see what comes next. The Hanged Man teaches us to remain suspended in uncertainty without rushing to premature conclusions. Transformation requires space. Growth cannot always be accelerated. This card also speaks directly to the human tendency to resist suffering. Naturally, we try to avoid pain whenever possible, but Jung observed that suffering often becomes transformative only when it is consciously experienced rather than unconsciously avoided. The Hanged Man does not glorify suffering for its own sake. Instead, it suggests that certain forms of psychological pain contain hidden meaning. When we stop asking, "How do I escape this?" and begin asking, "What is this experience trying to teach me?" the entire process changes. The suffering remains, but it becomes purposeful rather than meaningless. The tree from which the Hanged Man hangs is equally significant. Throughout mythology, trees often symbolize the axis connecting heaven and earth, spirit and matter, the conscious and the unconscious. In Norse mythology, Odin hangs from the world tree Yggdrasil for 9 days and 9 nights in order to gain wisdom and discover the runes. This myth beautifully illustrates the same psychological principle found in the tarot. Wisdom is rarely acquired through accumulation alone. Sometimes it emerges only after surrendering our previous understanding. The old self must temporarily die so that a wider consciousness can be born. The halo surrounding the Hanged Man's head reminds us that enlightenment is not always found on mountaintops or through extraordinary mystical experiences. Sometimes it appears in moments of complete uncertainty. The ego experiences these moments as failure because it can no longer control the outcome. The self, however, recognizes them as opportunities. Jung described the self as the organizing center of the entire psyche, always guiding us toward greater wholeness. The Hanged Man represents the moment when we begin trusting this deeper intelligence, rather than relying solely on conscious willpower. There is also a shadow side to this archetype. Healthy surrender should never be confused with passivity or helplessness. Some people remain suspended indefinitely because they are afraid to act. Others convince themselves that waiting is spiritual when it is actually avoidance. Jung repeatedly warned against identifying with any archetype. The goal is not to become the Hanged Man forever. The purpose of suspension is transformation. Once a new perspective has emerged, life asks us to return to action with greater wisdom. Remaining suspended after the lesson has been learned becomes another form of resistance. The Hanged Man also reveals something profound about sacrifice. In everyday language, sacrifice usually means giving something up. But psychologically, sacrifice means releasing an identity that no longer serves the development of the self. We sacrifice certainty to gain wisdom. We sacrifice false security to gain authenticity. We sacrifice control to discover trust. These are not losses in the ordinary sense. They are exchanges. Something limited is surrendered so that something larger can emerge. Ultimately, the Hanged Man reminds us that wisdom rarely arrives through force. It emerges through openness, through patience, and through the courage to remain present in uncertainty until a deeper truth reveals itself. Sometimes the greatest act of transformation is not moving forward at all. Sometimes it is allowing ourselves to hang between who we were and who we are becoming. Because only when the old perspective is surrendered can a new consciousness finally be born. Thank you for watching and for joining me on this exploration of the Hanged Man archetype. If this perspective resonated with you, Please consider subscribing to Rooted in Spirit and turning on notifications so you don't miss future videos. Together, we'll continue exploring tarot through the lens of Jungian psychology, archetypes, alchemy, mythology, and the timeless symbols that shape our inner lives. If you enjoyed this video, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever experienced a period in your life where everything seemed to pause, only to realize later that it was preparing you for profound transformation? Share your experience below. Until next time, remember that every symbol reflects a part of your own psyche, and every step towards self-knowledge brings you closer to becoming who you truly are. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next video.